अच्छा जी, तो so when we are starting with these bearings, I was asking what is a bearing, ठीक है जी, and one of your fellows said that it is an anti-friction component. अच्छा जी, anyone else? What is a bearing? जी, can someone tell what a bearing is? अच्छा, what is bearing? Anyways, what is the meaning of bearing?
बर्दाश्त करना.
Okay, so what does that mean then?
फोर्सेस को बर्दाश्त करना सर.
Bilkul. So this means that it might have something to do with a bearing of the load. Um, ठीक है जी, bearing of the loads. ठीक है. Now, so now if it is bearing,
सर ये माइक नजदीक करना.
uh, how about now? Is it okay?
Yes, fine.
Okay.
Yes, sir, fine.
Okay.
Yes.
So if we have to do something with the bearing of the loads, ठीक है जी. Now, if you look at these two um, statements here, it is anti-friction component and then bearing the load. So this means that bearing is something that support, that provides support for the load while it allows some motion. ठीक है जी. तो the bearing is an element, or it is a component, a mechanical part, that a component that is used so that you can support loads with it, plus it allows some motion. ठीक है जी. Now if we look at bearings, there are different types of bearings, and those types of bearings, if I write them down here, so the main जो types of bearings हैं, those are those can be divided into two types, and those are um, let's say one would be
सर आवाज आपकी आ रही है.
जी जी rolling contact bearings, and another one would be sliding contact bearings. ठीक है जी. So these are the two types of, these are the major two types of bearings. Now अगर आप देखें तो as the name suggests, what would be a rolling contact bearing?
सर इसके अंदर जो बॉल्स हैं वो रोल करेंगी.
अच्छा, balls है या जो भी है, लेकिन whatever we have, if there is motion, so that motion uh, if there is motion, so the motion between the moving part and the stationary part in these types of bearings is going to be uh, with rolling contact. ठीक है जी. So for example, जैसे अभी आपने कहा कि the balls will roll. ठीक है जी. अच्छा, यहाँ पे the motion between the stationary part and the moving part is going to be a sliding contact. So रोलिंग कॉन्टेक्ट हमारे पास क्या होता है कि फॉर एग्जांपल इफ यू रोल समथिंग ऑन द रोड ऑन द ग्राउंड, तो इट इज नॉट गोइंग टू स्लाइड. ठीक है जी. तो इस किस्म के the bearings of these types, they will have very what do you think, what about the friction in here? The friction is going to be
कम
very
होगी सर।
very less. ठीक है जी. हाँ, इस किस्म के bearings को these types of bearings, they are also called anti friction bearings, and this is the name that has been given to these when these bearings were first developed. लेकिन this is a misnomer. It is not something कि ये bearings जो हैं ये frictionless नहीं होते. They are not frictionless, but they offer very very small, very very little, very very less friction to ठीक है जी. Otherwise there is some friction. ठीक है जी. Now लेकिन in the case of sliding contact bearings, जो ये bearings है, there is more friction than this because there are two surfaces that slide over each other, that has sliding contact. ठीक है जी. फॉर एग्जाम्पल टायर को अगर आप देखें तो टायर रोल्स ओवर द ग्राउंड. ठीक है जी. And if you rub your hand on a table, so that is a sliding contact over there. Now let's see um, the types of bearings that you would see in the rolling contact. अगर हम if we take the rolling contact bearings and look at the types in there, so in the rolling contact bearings, um, there are there can be two types of bearings. One would be further इसको अगर हम classify करें, right? So we can have ball bearings, ठीक है जी, and we can have जी roller
रोलर
bearings. बिल्कुल, roller bearings. And you probably would have seen these two types of bearings because they are very common. Um, in the rolling contact bearings, the ball bearings are very common. The roller bearings are very common. If you look at the ball bearings are those bearings that uses balls, as it names as the names represent. So this is using balls and this is using roller rollers between the stationary and the moving parts. ठीक है जी. तो basically balls roll between the moving and the stationary parts, और यहाँ पे rollers जो हैं they roll between the moving and the stationary parts. Now, the bearing that you are looking at over here in the picture, this is a ball bearing. ठीक है जी, ये कौन सा bearing है? This is a ball bearing. Um, ये जो bearing है, this is a ball bearing, right? Now, this ball bearing um, is uh, is made up of different parts. And if you look at these parts, so the main parts over here, I will start with the outer race. ठीक है जी, तो ये जो part है, this is the outer race. ठीक है जी. Then there is the inner yeah, outer ring, sorry, outer ring, and then there is the inner ring. ठीक है जी. So this is the inner ring, and then there is this separator or retainer, or there is these grooves where these balls sit in there. तो अगर आप यहाँ पे देखें तो ये groove, ठीक है जी, and we make these grooves in the inner ring and the outer ring so that this ball can accommodate in there. So these balls sit in there, लेकिन these balls are then put in a cage, ठीक है जी, और separator, या इसको इस चीज को we call this a separator, a retainer, or a cage, right? So this is the inner ball race, जिसको हम कहते हैं, या the outer ball, ring ball race, या inner ring ball race. The balls basically sit in these grooves, and um, they race in these, they move in these. ठीक है जी. तो basically when the ball rolls, देखिए, for example, अगर if we look at a ball, this is how it's going to look like. ठीक है जी. तो um, if we consider this surface like this, ठीक है जी.
सर आवाज बहुत ज्यादा स्लो है सर.
आवाज इसलिए स्लो है कि आप कनेक्शन में शायद प्रॉब्लम है मेरे ख्याल में. Is everybody else और लोगों को आवाज सही आ रही है?
यस सर.
ठीक है ना, क्योंकि आपकी आवाज भी सही नहीं आ रही, तो इट मींस दैट यू हैव सम प्रॉब्लम विद योर इंटरनेट. ठीक है जी. तो देखें, लेट्स से अगर इफ आई टेक अ स्मॉल पॉइंट इन हियर, ठीक है जी, तो एंड इफ आई स्टार्ट रोलिंग दिस, तो व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन? If this rolls in this direction, so what will happen कि it is going to proceed. ठीक है जी, ऐसे I would put the color the same. ठीक है जी. कुछ देर के बाद it is going to be here. ठीक है जी. और ये डॉट कहाँ पे होगा? Where will this dot be? ये यहाँ पे आ चुका होगा, right? So this dot is going to move here. Similarly, this is going to go further ऐसे, sorry, ऐसे, ठीक है जी. And the dot is going to move over here, ठीक है जी, and so on. ठीक है जी. तो with rolling, the ball is not going to remain here, but it is going to circle around in this race. ठीक है जी. So the ball is going to rotate and then rotate around the axis of the shaft. ठीक है जी. Did everybody get that? Did
Yes,
everybody
sir.
get that? Actually, so so this is what we have now. If you look at the inner ring, it has some diameter in the inside diameter, which is known as bore. Okay? And with this bore, it is, with this bore, we make the selection of the bearing so that it can fit into a shaft. Okay? Right? Similarly, if you look over here, these corners are not sharp, and there is corner radius to that because we don't want to have sharp corners with moving parts. This is the width of the bearing. Similarly, ये जो यहाँ पे this portion यहाँ पे, this is known as the shoulders. ठीक है जी, so that the balls do not come out. There are shoulders that retain the balls in there in the groove. ठीक है जी. Um, why do we have this separator? Because we want these these balls to be at a certain distance from each other, or we want to separate them so that they do not touch each other, and they maintain that distance with each other. ठीक है जी? Any question? And this is the face of the bearing. ठीक है जी? Any question? Actually, generally, you would have seen that these types of bearings, they are sealed. So they are sealed over here. You probably, if you pick up a bearing, you would see that both of these sides are have a plate that it is sealed, and because first of all there is a lubricant that is put in there, and then they are sealed so that they are not opened again, and nothing from outside, which are foreign particles, do not enter into these grooves, and do not block the way of these balls. ठीक है जी? So dirt, dust वगैरह, that does not go in there, and generally grease is used in these types of bearings. ठीक है जी? Any question? Any question?
सर
No,
ये
sir.
जो हम सीलिंग करते हैं ये कैसे रोटेट होती है सर, फिर जो प्लेट्स हम कर लगा देते हैं?
Well, that is done in such a way that you know, you just put a, यानी यहाँ पे there is a, a it's just a very thin plate that you put over here. ठीक है जी? That seals only this portion. यहाँ पे हम ऐसे लगाते हैं. Let me just, देखिए, if this is a bearing, right? And then we have balls in here. ठीक है जी? So what do you do is that you would put ये area जो है ना यहाँ पे, you just seal it with with a with a plastic or some यहाँ पे ये जो जो area है, ये on this side and on the other side. ठीक है जी? तो यहाँ पे एक so that you hide these balls. ठीक है जी? but it does not block the motion of the rollers or the balls. ठीक है जी? Now let's see, if I go further, so there are different types of ball bearings. For example, we have deep groove ball bearing, and as the name says, you have a deep groove in here. This is the most common um, type of bearing, of ball bearings. Um, in the toys, in all those machines that you see around, you would see this deep groove ball bearing. ठीक है जी? And due to this deep groove, it can take, देखें, if we look at a bearing, as we said, so what does a bearing do? It takes some load. ठीक है जी? So if it takes load, there are generally speaking, if we take a bearing, so let's say हमारे पास ये एक bearing है. uh, let's say that we have a shaft, right? So that, let's say this is a shaft, and there is a bearing that is mounted on this shaft. ठीक है जी? Let's say this provides supports. यहाँ पे एक bearing है और यहाँ पे दूसरा. Let's say these two are bearings. ठीक है जी? So what can be the loads uh, that this shaft has? Yeah, what are the loads that a bearing support? देखिए, there can be two types of loads. One would be uh, a load which is this one. So what do we call this load? इसको हम क्या कहते हैं? What is this load? If it is along the axis of the shaft, what load is this? देखिए, this is the axis of the shaft, right? So what type of load is this then? What do we call this load? Are you guys in here? Hello? Hello? जी, anyone? Hamad? Hello? Can anyone state what this load would be? Nobody? Hello?
जी सर.
I think I got disconnected, can I?
Yes sir.
زما خاله the meeting na time هم ختمي, huh? So we are going to